Welcome to WVVH-TV's Newsmaker program. I'm Ernie Shimizi. Today we have a very special guest, Pastor A.R. Bemard. Pastor Bemard, a pleasure to be with you. Normally our viewers see you on Christian Cultural Center's program on WVVH, but there's something big that you're sharing with our viewers and with the people of New York.
Yes. In fact, the news broke and that I'm seriously considering a run for mayor of New York City.
Mayor of New York City. And when we think of this, your history, you've accomplished so much. Christian Cultural Center is one of the largest churches in the Northeast, 37,000 active members. What you did, creating that wonderful, that road to Damascus must have really been an amazing one for you, like the Apostle Paul. When that all came together, you and your wife started this in a storefront in Brooklyn.
That's right. It's been an interesting journey. I was in banking for 10 years, from 1970 to the end of 79. In 75, I had my spiritual epiphany, and by 78, decided that this was a calling upon my life.
Now, you could have had a wonderful career in banking.
Yes.
Could have retired like many of these. But when that calling came to you and you started with your wife, Karen.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And you have 7 boys, we should add,
Yeah.
7 children and 21 grandchildren. That moment when that came upon you, that must have been really divine inspiration.
It was. It was a very deep moment, one that my wife played a pivotal role, because I knew that if she was in agreement, then I could go forward with it. I wanted to make sure that we were on the same page. And she was. She came to me one evening and she said, you know, you need to do this and I'm going to support you. And she left working a great job at the Queens County Supreme Court. Before that, she worked for Mutual of New York Insurance Company. But she decided that she was going to raise our children, stay at home, and support me in what we both believed I was called to do. So in 78, we started a small Bible study in a storefront, and 35 years later, here we are.
Well, you're a New Yorker, true and true. But that transition from being a pastor who's respected by all religions, you're part of the Council of Churches, you're president of the Council of Churches of New York. You've been, the Board of Rabbis has honored you. You've been ecumenical in every which way of what you've been doing with your ministry. But what's most interesting is when politicians run for political office here in New York, they often make the trek to CCC to get your blessing.
The political word is that all roads lead to CCC if you're running for a public office in New York City. And it's true. We have hosted, gosh, so many at every level, the governor to local politicians, mayor, over the years. And when you have a congregation of our size and influence, it's a very important stop on the political campaign trail.
Why now? It's a different arena from being a pastor, although you're responsible for people, you're responsible for budgets, you have to take care of many issues. It's running a small city. Why now?
Interestingly enough, it is. It's a $50 million organization that we've built, and global influence. We have over 110 employees and manage 1,500 volunteer workers that function, weekly. And it's been quite an experience. And I realize how my banking experience prepared me administratively to run an operation of this size. Why now? I did not have any political ambitions. I enjoy doing what I'm doing. I've got quite a few things on the front burner. But I have always been concerned and have a great love for the city, how it runs, what the leadership is, the direction that the city is going in. I've been very pleased with what Mike Bloomberg has done over the past 12 years. And although we don't agree on every issue, he's really brought stability and strength to the city economically and politically. So the question is, where is the city going to be going in the next 4 years? Who is going to be at the helm of the ship? And that concern, little did I know, would translate into a possible run for mayor myself. The Republican leaders, New York State Chairman Ed Cox, gave me a call, came to visit, and then we had lunch with some other Republican leaders. And he said, you know, your name came up, and everyone was intrigued and pleasantly surprised and wondered if this is something that you'd be interested in. So we talked over several months, and I, of course, conferred with my wife and my family to make sure that she was in agreement. And to my surprise, she said, you know, I feel good about this. This is not something that you are pursuing or have pursued. This is something like everything else in our life has been brought to you. So let's see what happens. Let's see where it goes.
Pastor Bemard, we just came off of a very contentious presidential campaign in which there were two choices, Republican, Democrat, and issues of one's faith, one's morality is tested. And this was on both sides. In the case of Mitt Romney, his stance on a number of issues came into play. Even the fact that he was part of a religion that had not really been to the prominence of president. Are you prepared for that type of criticism? And how would you answer that criticism where if someone says, he's a great guy, he's a good guy, he's a pastor. Here in New York, whenever we think of pastor or reverends, you know, the necessary conclusions go to people like Reverend Sharpton and others of that who were part of the political scene. How do you counter stereotypes?
Well, I've enjoyed throughout my life shattering stereotypes. Black, Republican, New York City, clergymen, 85% of my congregation, Democrats, 10% Republicans, 5% independents or undecided. And yet, I've provided the kind of leadership that they can respect, the integrity that they can follow. And let me say that religious influence on any leadership is a legitimate question. But of greater concern is leadership without a moral compass. And I think that should be something that we consider more importantly, because without a moral compass, which faith and religion gives, where's the conscience? What are the guidelines? What are the boundaries? Where are the ethics and morality that guide the decisions that that leader will make?
You've not been afraid to get involved in controversial issues. When the wealthy head of the IMF was accused of raping a young woman, you were one of the first people, in fact, I'd even say the first person that I could recall that stood by that young lady who was a maid in a hotel, had no support, taking on a fellow who was going to become the president of France. And I saw Pastor Bemard standing next to her, also with the Trayvon Martin case in Florida. Mm-hmm. I read your comments and interviews which you conducted, which were very forceful as to what that meant and how that hurt society in general. You're from Brooklyn. You really, when there's something that reaches you, you really feel the need to jump in and act.
I've always felt a social responsibility. You know, too often we see churches in a purely religious context. But worship represents 10% of what a church does during the week. The other 90%, it performs programs and community outreach that really makes it a community benefit institution that helps to lessen the burden of government. So part of the responsibility and calling of a church or a house of worship is to be socially involved. So I've always sensed this social responsibility. Growing up, I was always sensitive to the issues that were happening. Growing up in the 60s, civil rights movement, the black movement, the war in Vietnam, all of these things drew my attention as a young child, growing up into a young adult. So I carry that with me into the church. And it's about justice, it's about fairness. And when one of my parishioners, Ken Thompson, who was the attorney that took on this case for Nafissatou Diallo against DSK, you know, he was going up against some big money and big influence. And I said, you know what? Now that I've heard the facts, this is a matter of justice. So I was willing to take that risk and reach beyond my own religious context, because she's Muslim. And it was the Muslim leaders that came to me. And they said, we trust you your integrity, your record. We know that if you get involved, you're going to make the kind of stand that needs to be made. And I looked at it again, and I said, you know what? I need to be involved. So we stood with her. And even though the criminal case was lost, I said, no, we didn't lose. And it's amazing how things played out after that with DSK. He was his own undoing.
Yes.
But she was vindicated, and so were we, when we won the civil lawsuit, and that was settled. She was by herself. In fact, some of the community leaders who would run to her side normally in the city of New York were reluctant, because they were concerned that this may be another Tawana Brawley situation. You know, and you remember that case where, you know, things were manufactured. It turned out to be questionable as to the validity. But this woman, she touched my heart deeply. And I had no choice, really, but to stand by her.
It's so easy for this city to become polarized in different ways. People take sides. If you're a Met fan like I am, my brother was a Yankees fan, there's always, always issues. To be the mayor of New York, you're going to have to be the person to answer for the policeman who might make a mistake one day, or tragedies that have befell our city over the years, from natural ones like this most recent storm, which people are still hurting in your community, in Brooklyn, Staten Island, in the city in general. As mayor, how do you keep your balance in all of this to fight for your people, yet fight for what is right?
I think it's about, first of all, success with any leader does not rest totally on that leader. It's about putting together a good team of individuals that you can trust, who understand the issues, who share the same DNA, the same philosophy of life, to be applied to running a city as large as New York City. Putting that good team together, and then understanding that there will be disagreements, but the willingness to sit down, collaborate, work through the issues, and come to an answer of what works. And what works, as I said, may not be Republican, it may not be Democrat, it may not be independent. It may be a mixture of those things, which I tend to think it would be. But finding out what works, and then taking the responsibility to apply it in a way that everyone benefits. And it's going to call for sacrifice along the way. But again, it's finding out what works, applying it in a fair and balanced way so that everyone benefits.
A parish of 37,000 individuals, all of these people know you as their pastor. All of them want access to you if they have a particular issue, if they're getting married, if whatever the issue, whatever the event is, they want Pastor Bernard to be part of it. Do you think that gives you a special insight over other people who haven't had the ability to engage with the multitude in that sort of way? And everyone brings their problems to you, from marital to financial and otherwise.
I think it does, because I have interacted with people at every level of life. Politicians who are a member of my congregation, big business individuals who are part of my congregation, the factory worker, the civil servant. I have walked them through many issues in their life. So it sensitizes me to every New Yorker, not just one community, but every community which is represented in my congregation. I've had the opportunity to lead and influence and guide in some way. So it's a matter of taking that experience and translating it to a much larger body, the city of New York.
again, this is not something that you sought out on your own. It's something that you're being asked to do. Right now, the race for the Republican candidacy for mayor has a few people who've thrown their hat into. Some have been. Are you thinking of also being part of any other political line, like the Independence Party or any of the other parties that are out there? Is that something that, as Mayor Bloomberg ran on both the Republican and I believe the Independent,
right?
Independent,
right,
yes.
Right. Well, first and foremost, I am a Republican. And unfortunately, we have to clarify what that means, because today the Republican Party is so fractured and it's suffering from an image problem.
Yes.
And I think that this last presidential election was a big wake-up call for the party to let them know that the election of Barack Obama in 2008 was not some political fluke.
What does it mean to be a Republican?
It's to subscribe to a set of values of faith, family, and country. And I think that is critical. It is embracing the sacredness of human life and the responsibility that we have to be our brother's keeper. It's about not developing a dependency on government, but government empowering people to help themselves, giving them the tools that they need to rise up from levels of poverty into the middle class and into the affluent. I think that's what the whole Republican image is about. It started, you know, as a party of Lincoln, but a party that was going against the atrocities of slavery in this nation. It took on a very strong responsibility to try to bring the country together that was divided by a civil war. So I think that's the Republican Party that I know. Those are the values that I subscribe to.
At a time when unemployment is at an all-time high, and young people complete their college degrees and all they're left with is receiving envelopes from Sally Mae after they graduate from school, how do you instill in them that desire that society is not lost, that they should be part of this and part of the potential successes someone like you has enjoyed in this society?
Well, I'm glad you asked a question about young people, and there are my concerns. Of course, I raised 7 sons and got 21 grandchildren now, and they're going through the educational process, moving into society. And I think it's important that we give hope. Young people represent 60% of our population, but 100% of our future. So an investment in them is an investment in our future. It's about education, it's about job creation, but it's also about getting them to believe in themselves and the creative ability that's inside of them that they need to tap into, which this country was built on. And you know, 85% of the American economy is fueled by entrepreneurs. It was interesting in 2011, there were 500,000 new applications for new businesses that were processed in Washington. So what does that say? When we're in a recession, people are realizing, look, I'm not going to depend on some large company or the government. I'm going to become a part of the answer and begin to think creatively and become an entrepreneur. And I will encourage that amongst our young people.
The strength of the family is important. In your case, I'll say in my case, we both are products of single-parent households. My mother raised my brother and myself, and we spoke of your mother. With households such as that, how do you create in young people that desire not to give up and to be closer to religion and be closer to love of country?
I would say that my faith had a lot to do with it. Even though for the first 23 years of my life I was searching. I was raised as a Catholic, but in order to play basketball I had to join the Methodist Church and play the City League. I attended the Lutheran Church because of their summer programs, and that was to keep a latchkey kid like me busy so I wouldn't get in trouble. So the church played a very practical role in my growth and development, but all along there were certain values that were being instilled inside of me, and a work ethic, and a sense that you're not entitled to anything, but you've been given God-given gifts, and you have a responsibility to discover what those talents and abilities are and use them to somehow not only better yourself and your own station in life, but to give back to society, give back to community.
You have an advantage over other people who might be running. Now, I won't say all, but you've lived in a fishbowl. Being the pastor responsible for 37,000 present-day members of CCC is an awesome responsibility. And we live in a world now where you have the TMZs of the world. Everyone's looking for something negative to try to say about someone. If you're a religious leader, they'll be even harsher on you. Looking forward, you know that there are going to be a number of issues that you're going to be facing. Number one, the gay issue, and of course, the abortion issue and women's rights and whatever else is part of that discussion, which has been used to separate the political parties from one and another. How do you answer your critics who say, well, being a pastor, you'll definitely not be one to support such and such?
Well, you know, if I run, I won't be running to be a pastor. I'd be running to be a leader of the city of New York. The city of New York is a municipal corporation. The mayor is the CEO of that corporation. So he has a responsibility, or she, he has a responsibility to run it as such. And the responsibility is to represent all New Yorkers, not just one select group. And there may be individuals that I disagree with in certain principles personally. But that does not mean that I discount their rights as citizens of this city. Because as a citizen, you have the right to participate fully in the social and political life of the city, the society, without discrimination, without any type of repression. I have a responsibility, if I'm the chief executive of this city, to make sure that those rights are protected and respected. And that's exactly what I'll do.
Looking forward, as you plan this, you haven't announced yet. I'm hoping that you will come back and be with us after the announcement is made.
This will be my first campaign promise, yes. I'll be back.
Well, it's interesting you should mention that. Mayor Bloomberg, one of his first campaign promises was to come back to a neighborhood in Brooklyn that my brother and I are part of. We were there when he made this promise. To this local fellow who said, you're by this train station, you're shaking hands. I bet if you become mayor, you're not going to come back. The morning he became mayor, he was on that street corner on Utrecht Avenue by New Utrecht High School.
Right, I remember that.
And he was there and he fulfilled his campaign promise. My brother and I were there also. But I appreciate that. I'm going to hold you to that.
I know you will.
To that, because we followed your career over the years, and we know what a person of integrity that you are, a person who has a business sense, which we admire. You know, we're Hamptons TV. We have the people who've distinguished themselves in the world of entertainment, business, whatever. And you've been able to bring all of this together, but in the process, deliver the message which you've been anointed to deliver, which is a significant message, but also show life in a community that most churches are not showing life in a community. But you're responsible for your people, and that's really, I think, something that needs to be told, and that is that you've created programs within CCC which are models. Is it true you borrowed from American Express and some other entities to bring business sensibilities and marketing and management to the church level, and it's become something to be marveled?
That's part of our success, because really what we're doing is servicing people. You know, my present boss, JC, or his initials, you know, he said, if you want to be great in life, find a way to serve people. therein lies your greatness. So we understand ourselves as a service institution. And I wanted to know, how could we best serve our constituency, our parishioners, in a way that gives them an experience that brings loyalty to who we are as an organization. So I decided to take a look at what corporations do and are concerned about. If they're going to grow and be successful as a business, how do they do it? And at that time, which was in the early 90s, I looked at American Express, and they had an incredible customer service program. So I went to one of their executives, and I said, you know, I'd like to see your customer service program. And he said, well, who are you? Where are you coming from? Right away, you know, I may be a spy. I said, no, I'm a pastor of a church. And they were intrigued to know that a pastor would want that kind of information, would be concerned about that. I said, yeah, that's how I see ourselves. We are delivering services. We deliver a product. It's a message. But how we package that as an experience is what will attract people. So we took it, we converted it, no pun intended, and began to train our volunteer staff as well as our full-time employees. And it made quite an impact on the growth and development of the church. So that went on for about 10 years. Then we started to revisit that model, and we found the Disney model. I took 1,000 staff members down to the Disney Training Institute several years ago so that they can see how it works firsthand. A friend of mine, Tom Cannellan, wrote a book, The Keys of the Magic Kingdom, and Tom did that book based upon the principles that make Disney work. So I had all of my staff read the book, and then we went down there looking for the book in application. It was an incredible time, and it really gave them an understanding of what I've been talking about for the past 10 years. So it's about servicing people. In 1998, two Harvard professors did this study, and they said that we're moving from a products and services-based economy to an experience-based economy. So people are judging entities, whether it's a church, a hotel, any service industry, by what they experience as a customer. So we understood that, and we began to see ourselves as providing an experience. So when people come to church on Sunday, and whether it's the worship service or they access our programs, for them it's an experience. And they're comparing us not to the church down the street, but they're comparing us to other organizations, institutions that they've been serviced by. We understand that.
Pastor Bemard, where the road will lead is something you'll discover in the weeks ahead. To be mayor of the city of New York, they say it's the toughest job in the country. Well, it's toughest or second toughest, you know, the comparison there. But it's so exciting to see that this is the next step for this young fellow from Brooklyn who will be bringing all of his skills and all of his success. This is something to be admired. We're looking forward to following your journey and seeing where it leads in the months ahead.
Thank you. And it is a journey. A journey that I consider myself blessed to be a part of. And where it's going to lead, I don't know.
Thank you for watching Newsmakers. For WVVH-TV, I'm Ernie Shimizi.